the package, the 5th overall pick with a player, is getting Brandon Ingram going to solve at least a fraction of your problems? And honestly, I would say yes, because they need someone like Brandon, but does he solve everything? No. So there's that too. So I'm curious what you think about that.
Oh, yeah, we can get into that for sure. I've talked with Corey about this because I want to give Corey credit. Corey has been on the Brandon Ingram trade probably since last October. Want to give him his flowers there and his credit. I would say that the Pistons do have enough, and I'll explain why. If you look at the Pelicans cap space and you look at the lack of center depth, they've been reportedly high on Isaiah Stewart since the 2020 NBA draft. They tried to trade up and get him. The Pistons said no thanks. They tried to trade for him this year. The Pistons again said no thanks. I honestly believe that if you want to offer, now this is just me saying like players that you could offer for Brandon Ingram if you want to get the ball rolling. Isaiah Stewart, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. I think those are the types of players that the Pelicans would want. Jaden Ivey, I'll explain why they would want a guy like Jaden Ivey. They don't have a point guard, Jeff.
Right.
CJ McCollum runs the show. CJ McCollum is more of just a movement shooting guard. I think a Jaden Ivey and CJ McCollum, backcourt could be fun for New Orleans. Jalen Duren, why would that work? They need a center. They need a center that's on a rookie deal. They need a center that's on a cheap contract, because if you look at their salary cap, they're paying Zion. They're paying CJ McCollum. They want to do a rookie extension with Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, probably. Jalen Duren's on a rookie scale contract. So if you want to get Brandon Ingram, those are the types of players that you're probably going to have to deal. And I know some fans have a lot of attachment towards all those players that I named. But if you want to get better players on this team, you're going to have to say goodbye to some of the guys that we've drafted in the lottery over the past 4 seasons.
Yeah, and it comes down to, again, to kind of go back to the roster construction thing, I like a Cade and Brandon Ingram 1-2 punch. I think they fit better. If you're talking about strictly just fit at this point in time, then probably Ivy and Cade. Even though you'd like to see more of a sample size, but you cannot deny getting a guy like Brandon Ingram, who's a 20-plus point scorer, who's shooting close to 40% for three in his career off like 3+ attempts. And he's immediately someone who could play on the wing for you and get you. And him and Cade, I think, even Brandon Ingram in terms of his playmaking, he's a little underrated too. So I like the fit there. Ivy, I wouldn't. And to your point about who you'd give up, I think it makes sense. I would keep Duren personally, and then you deal Ivy and throw in assets, whatever it is, draft capital, throw in the 5th overall pick. And I know it seems expensive, but you have to think where you are. You're going to have to significantly overpay for a Brandon Ingram in free agency. So if you have an opportunity to acquire him via trade, like you said, you're going to have to, unfortunately, get rid of some of the players that are kind of homegrown. But again, I think Brandon Ingram with some free agency signings, you add some more shooting. I like it. And I think that it does improve this roster pretty significantly, in my opinion. Even though the whole thing about Brandon Ingram, and I see people say this, like, oh, he's never healthy. Like, he misses about 20 games a year. Yes, that's a fair argument, but you can't deny when he was healthy. I mean, 2 years ago, when the Pelicans, not this past season, but a couple years ago when they made the playoffs, dude was averaging 27 in the postseason. Brandon Ingram's a bucket. I mean, and he's efficient. He's close to 50% from the field and 40 from three. So I love the fit. And I think ideally that's how you get a step closer to building this roster correctly around your franchise player, Cade Cunningham. So I'm all aboard.
And I also think, to that argument, I think he would have career highs across the board. I don't know what it is. Seems like every time we get a player, whether it's in free agency or trade, they have career years. Like Blake Griffin, when he got traded here, had his best statistical career in a Detroit Pistons uniform. I think Brandon Ingram and a Cade Cunningham together, that could be a whole lot of fun. But again, it depends what the package is. It depends what you have to give up. If you can get him without giving up a whole lot, then sure, do it. But I think he's going to have a whole lot of suitors out there. Teams like the Lakers, teams like the Hawks. There's just a lot of teams that need one of the best underrated small forwards, in my opinion. They can get his own shot, score at all 3 levels. I think the Pistons can get him, but it depends how much are you willing to give up, and are you going to extend him to a $200 million contract right after you trade for him? That's another thing you have to ask yourself. Is he worth that 35 to 40 million that he's probably going to command with a new contract that the Pelicans just do not want to give him?
Yeah, and I think the argument that I will listen to is the inability to play a full season, which is fair. I understand that, but in terms of immediate impact players, dude, he is, to me, he is the one. And I think he complements if you have him and Asar. Like you're again, this is a team that was the worst, one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you look at the Magic, they didn't. I think they're bottom of the league in 3-point attempts and makes, but they defend better. They're better in every area. They turn the ball over less. Schematically, they're better. So they won close to 50 games this year. So it's not just shooting. There's a lot of things you have to solve, and I think Brandon Ingram, like you said, a 3-level scorer, a pretty efficient scorer. I think that solves a lot of immediate issues. But like you said, like it comes down, do you want to give him $200+ million? Not that the Pistons are in a position to, turn away talent, but I don't know if fans can handle, hitting the reset button or at least close to that with this long rebuild process. I don't know. I think you're getting to a point where you're going to have to trade Ivy, unfortunately. And I do. I'm a fan. When he was first drafted, I really did envision a Cade and Jaden Ivey backcourt. But the problem is, the farther the Mavs make in the playoffs, you're looking at how they play and you're thinking, okay, Kyrie Irving's basically, he's one of the best ball handlers, one of the most craftiest scorers of all time. But he's basically a 2-guard. I mean, he's a 50, 40, 90 guy. Like, can Ivy ever be no, he can't. I'm sorry. Like how efficient Kyrie Irving is, that's what makes that thing work, and how great Luka is. I just don't see that. That's the pathway for having a backcourt. If you want to have one of the best backcourts in the league, and I just don't have faith that Ivy, he can be a terrific player, but I'm talking about just playing off of Cade, those two being able to share the backcourt together. I just don't see a pathway where that can work at this point. So I think Ivy's the odd one out. I like Duren. The shot blocking, at least from last year, I was disappointed. I think especially with how athletic he is, and the ankle injuries concern me, but I'm still bought in on Duren. I think he could be a really good player. And I like a Cade, Brandon Ingram, Asar, Duren. I like that in some free agents. I like that better than what they currently have. I will say that. Drafting someone at 5th overall and being like, all right, sign some free agents. Let's keep it pushing. Like, no, I'm cool. I want to add talent. I want to build this thing. You got to sell something to Cade. I mean,
yeah,
you do. And it kind of goes back into the point earlier when we're talking about head coach. And I saw someone brought it up in the chat too about having multiple head coaches for Cade Cunningham. Like I just want to build this roster the correct way, and you got to get him scores and you got to get him spacing. You got to get him some shooters, and they can do that in free agency. But Brandon Ingram brings a lot more to the table, in my opinion. But $200 million is a lot. I will admit, it's a shit ton of money.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I personally think that if the Pistons were to trade Duren, I'm telling you right now, a lot of fans, and I understand it, would be so pissed off.
Absolutely.
Because you see the potential. Like, if he unlocks it on both sides, that's easily a top 10 center in the NBA. Obviously, this season, there were flashes where you saw what he could become. But again, the ankle injuries, like he's had 10 NBA injuries and 8 of them have been ankles. And he started wearing ankle braces, which I'm really happy for because, when a big man has ankle injuries like that, that's such a red flag. And, since he did wear those ankle braces, he didn't hurt his ankles for the remainder of the season. But I think he'll get better. I think the one thing, I know we're going kind of off topic with this. I think the one thing that the Pistons made a big mistake with was they didn't get Jalen Duren a vet soon enough in his career. Like we saw Taj Gibson towards the end. They should have got a vet last summer to work with James Wiseman, to work with Jalen Duren, because I think a veteran presence is what has been missing on this, young rebuilding team over the past couple of years. Like you need an impactful vet to really, hype these guys up, help them in areas that maybe, they need more help on. I'm still very high on Jalen Duren. I know some people aren't in the community, and I understand it, obviously, because he kind of had an up and down year, but I'll just say, like, if they trade Jalen Duren and a Brandon Ingram package, I know Pistons fans would be extremely upset.